Our reading is by Elizabeth Foe, edited, and it is entitled Journeying. On long journeys, I find the tools and maps I need are tucked away in secret pockets of my own heart. I can measure my steps from here to there in months and years and countless joys and pains. A landscape that echoes the altitude of grief, the latitude of learning, the longitude of love. I have found my footsteps from years before, where I placed my feet in climbing rocks or stood barefoot in sand. The place where I held you and where you touched me, there in my heart, on my face, and there in my mind. In my knapsack of suede and blue, where I collect such souvenirs as shells and stones and feathers, I carry something beyond the physical evidence of travel, harboring the echo of voice and image of heart that taught me to celebrate and to grieve and allowed me to see how hearts could merge and divide and remain a witness to the map of love.
So this summer was a blockbuster summer for folks who love epic films about journeying and appreciate the style of director Christopher Nolan. How many folks did see The Odyssey so far? Okay, not so many, but whenever I was down by Regal Theater, that place was packed, and I think half were going to see Spider-Man, the other half were going for some Greek tragedy. So this is a sermon about journeying. It's one that I revisit from time to time, and recently a beloved elder said, I look around and there's a lot of new faces in the sanctuary, and I imagine online. So what do you think about revisiting the sermon, claiming our good baggage? Maria Claudia turned 52 years old, got divorced, and set up her first dating profile on Match.com. Getting back into the dating scene after 25 years just feels freaky, she told me. I'd met a couple people already, but they have so much emotional baggage. She paused and then laughed honestly. But you know, don't we all have emotional baggage? Yep. Author Jamie Hughes writes, the longer a life, the challenge is not the distance between destinations, but the difficulty of traveling light. My soul's a suitcase packed full, one half filled with what was, the other with what should be. Rosaline Johnson picks up on that sentiment, saying, there's a luggage limit to every passenger on a flight. The same rules apply to your life. You must eliminate some baggage before you can fly. But I actually think that there are two different kinds of emotional baggage. There's that heavy kind that weighs down our spirit, leads us to make unskillful choices, causes us to overreact, drives us to become guarded, or in some way tugs us so far from our best selves. That is the emotional baggage of hurts, of wounds, failures, disappointment, and the inevitable losses that accompany a life. And could I see by hands how many of us have at least one piece of that kind of emotional baggage. Okay. But dear ones, it's so important for us to remember that there is a second kind of emotional baggage. This emotional baggage is a source of lightness of being. It reminds us of hope and happiness. It nourishes us with the warmth of memory. It opens our bruised and hurting hearts. It whispers truths that some of us have long, long forgotten. This baggage invites us to remember when our lives were infused with moments of kindness, connection, wonder, synchronicity, a word some of us might use, grace, adventure, peace, pleasure, and a sense of possibility. This is good baggage. I'm going to get you some good baggage. So, this knapsack represents for me that second kind of emotional baggage. This knapsack is old. I think I bought it in 1987. I know a few folks here weren't born or were just learning how to walk in 1987. As you can see, its back straps are frayed, ripped, and threadbare. But this piece of baggage has been through so much of my life with me. From that day some 39 years ago when I carried it out of Eastern Mountain Sports, this has been my good baggage. And 39 years, I got my money's worth, I think, on this. That's a shout out to EMS. The places that this bag has gone. 4 decades ago, this bag was carried backstage at theaters, cabarets, and concert halls in Boston, Massachusetts, where I worked as a producer and a director and as an agent for some really extraordinary singers. A lifetime ago, that bag carried countless CDs. Remember those things, CDs? Into Boston radio stations, where I hosted a popular radio program featuring Broadway music and interviews with the great stage stars that were coming through town. This bag still glows from the sheer joy I experienced in those early radio days. For almost 3 decades, this bag rode back and forth on buses between Boston and New York City, more times than I could count. It holds the echoes of some of the best and the worst Broadway plays and musicals produced in the last 39 years, including the original cast of Rent, and the Broadway debut of young Daniel Radcliffe, otherwise known as Harry Potter. Long ago, this bag carried the hopes and dreams of 2 love-struck young men as Jim and I headed off for our first vacation together as a couple. 26 years later, it was with me in a Boston courtroom as a judge granted our divorce. And 2 lives that I thought would always be together went their separate ways. This bag was with me as I learned to walk solo into the new blessings I would discover in life's next chapter. For 8 years, this bag carried my lunch to Harvard Business School, where I worked as the coordinator of Alumni Career Services, assisting alums as they navigated the challenges of career change, some forced, some self-selected. It was there in that office that I learned over time to listen to people's stories and to ask gentle questions that allowed them to discover their own answers and next steps, a precursor to what would ultimately become my own call to ministry. In September of 1992, the year that Bill Clinton was first elected president, this bag traveled with me in my rusty Chevy Citation, thank you, Mom, a hand-me-down, as I rode from Boston to Santa Fe, New Mexico, called out to the starkness of the desert by something I couldn't name but could only feel inside and know I had to respond to. There, in that enchanted land of mesas and endless sky, I met a yoga master who would teach me an ancient spiritual practice that would change the direction of my life. That is no exaggeration. Traveling back to Boston from Santa Fe, I then carried this bag up the steps of Arlington Street Church for the first time. It was there in Boston's Arlington Street Church that I discovered Unitarian Universalism. Walking through the doors for the first time, blew my mind. Had no idea such a thing existed. This faith of radical welcome, this faith that allowed a 29-year-old gay man to sit in the pews and invited him to be fully who he was in every sense of the word. It was there at Arlington Street Church that I learned that our Unitarian Universalist religion is for joy, for love, for comfort, for challenge, for justice, and beloved community. And it was there that I felt the call to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. Filled with notebooks and research papers, my bag then spent 5 years traveling back and forth from my apartment to Harvard Divinity School as I studied for my Master of Divinity degree. It spent a summer in the burn unit at Massachusetts General Hospital, where I trained as a student chaplain and learned lots about death and even more about life. Filled with anticipation, in the summer of 2000, this bag headed down south to the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church in Glen Allen, a new congregation who called me to be their first official minister. This bag carried my first sermons as a newly ordained minister. Oh, bag, I apologize to you for those sermons. It was present as church members marched through the streets of Richmond for demanding a living wage for city workers, and was swept into City Hall, where long before marriage equality was the law of the land, we rallied for the right to have marriage licenses issued to all who wished to wed, the first time that ever happened in Virginia's capital city. This bag then headed back up north to a suburb of Boston, where I was called to be the 36th minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading, Massachusetts. I was charged with overseeing a multi-million-dollar expansion of the church campus. Trust me, multi-million dollars in Boston doesn't get you that much space. And then we were able to welcome many young families into the loving embrace of Unitarian Universalism. I still see their faces. It was a time of abundant growth as well as many farewells, as so many beloved elders passed into the mysteries of death. So this bag and I have journeyed far. It was with me on 2 witness trips to occupied Palestine. It soaked up the anguish in Palestinian refugee camps. It rubbed against the massive cement walls that keep Palestinians separated from their homes and their farmland, separated from each other and their freedom. This bag absorbed man-manufactured madness as I was tear-gassed by the Israeli Defense Forces at an anti-occupation protest in the Palestinian village of Belin. I also carried this bag into Auschwitz in Poland, where I stood speechless in that place of incomprehensible inhumanity and mourned how cycles of cruelty are so easily passed forward. And then 14 years ago, terrified, truly terrified, I carried it into Kabul, Afghanistan, to meet the women and men who were working to rebuild a free society after the fall of the Taliban. This bag is infused with their courage. I wonder what's happened to those I met now that the Taliban has returned. This bag bumped along with me in the back of a pickup truck as I tracked lions in a wildlife preserve in South Africa. It went into the endangered rainforests of Uganda searching for African mountain gorillas, found a lot of them, and it bore witness at Rwanda's heartbreaking Museum of Genocide. Then Iraqi security forces opened this bag and searched it for explosives before allowing me to enter and worship at some of the holiest shrines in the Islamic world in the sacred city of Karbala, Iraq. That spiritual energy forever vibrates within this bag. A year later, in Iran, this bag traveled throughout that country as I marveled at its beauty. This bag radiates the warmth of the Iranian people. Since then, it's been to China and several Central Asian countries as I explored the route of the ancient Silk Road. I like to imagine that 1,896 years of travel and trade are alive within the fibers of this bag. The bag also made many trips to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. First for holiday visits back home to mom and dad. Then, as my mom was dying, it made bi-weekly trips, Thursdays through Saturday, holding the computer with which I would write my sermons in airports or on the plane. It made, again, the trip to Pittsburgh as I moved my dad into senior living, and then more of those Thursday through Saturday visits as he grew ill and finally passed into the mysteries of death. This bag sat near the front door as I emptied my dad's apartment, clearing it out for the next elder who would, for a time, call that place home. Into it, I tucked black and white photos from Dad's childhood, his Army dog tags, and the prayer that I offered my mom and dad at their 50th wedding anniversary. All reminders of lives well lived. Since then, this bag has made many trips to Seattle, where my sister and her family live, a place for making more memories. This bag was with me 11 years and 4 months ago, as for the first time I walked past those plastic sequoia tree trunks at the Fresno International Airport, to be greeted by the ministerial search team from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno, some of whom are with us today. 11 years ago, it was a whirlwind week of potlucks and Q&A sessions prior to the vote to call me as the next minister, lucky enough, blessed enough to serve this congregation. This bag was here during my first summer in Fresno, where I said, "What the heck was I thinking?" 11 years ago, it was with me as ash fell from the skies during raging wildfires, and I truly wondered if this bag would melt when the temperature topped 115 degrees. This bag is now infused with the very best of California's Central Valley, farm stand Armenian cucumbers, world-famous stone fruit, and our city's greatest treasure, freshly picked Fresno State corn. It has absorbed spray from Yosemite's soaring springtime waterfalls and the scent of wildflowers growing above Pine Flat Dam. This bag felt outrage at Black Lives Matter vigils and heard many pleas at City Hall for justice and equity for all Fresnans, not just the ones who live in North Fresno. This bag was in Washington, D.C. at the kickoff of the Poor People's Campaign in May of 2019 and watched as the pride flag flew for the first time at Fresno City Hall. And then something none of us imagined would ever happen. In March of 2020, this bag carried our congregation's candle of community from this sanctuary to my home when the pandemic locked us down and we became an online community. A year and several months later, it carried that candle of community back into this sanctuary when we reopened our Alluvial Avenue campus alongside our online campus. We were the first Unitarian Universalist, among the first Unitarian Universalist congregations in America to reopen. This bag holds the magic of California's Central Coast, especially Cambria. It has visited the Mesa Verde ICE detention facility outside of Bakersfield and holds the pain of those unjustly incarcerated there. It sat in my front hallway of my house on that shocking election night when it was clear that that convicted felon, serial liar, and corrupt con man was being returned to the White House. You may hiss to your heart's content. More recently, it has been to No Kings protests and many other times of shared good trouble, including the founding convention of United San Joaquin. So, I know at this point, at least one of you, probably all of you, are wondering why I have shared so much of my personal journey this morning. Why does my own good baggage matter to you? Because it's a reminder that each one of us has good baggage too. We all have it. But we tend to focus on our negative baggage, and we all have it. But there's that thing beyond that negative baggage. There's the good baggage that holds the positive and transforming memories of our life's journey. We all have good baggage, even if it's just a few experiences. Good baggage that reminds us where we've been and how we've gotten to be who we are in this moment. We truly need good baggage to remind us of our journey through the years, the faces, places, stories, and fullness of how we have become the person we are now. And trust me, going through all of these memories, it's just filled my heart and my mind. Elizabeth Fowle writes, "On long journeys, I find the tools and maps I need are tucked away beneath the surface of things in the secret pockets of my own heart. I can measure my steps from here to there in months and years and countless joys and pains. a landscape that echoes the altitude of grief, the latitude of learning, the longitude of love. I have found my footsteps from years before, where I placed my feet and where life touched me, there in my heart, there in my mind. In my knapsack of suede and blue, I carry something beyond the physical evidence of travel, harboring the echo of voice and image that taught me to celebrate and to grieve, and allowed me to see how hearts could merge and remain a witness to the map of love. My spiritual friends, may we remain witnesses to our maps of love. I wish you, my fellow travelers, good baggage. May we truly treasure the memories, the experiences, the learning, the growing, and the celebration. Que así sea, bendito sea. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.